let's try and dovetail some things here, because
Sure.
going back to your early days, you obviously weren't cutting on an Avid or an Edit Droid or any kind of video system.
We started out working on leather scraped very, very thin, and we would sew the frames together.
The first cut, the first cut, the first cut.
I'll just teach you simple cuts to start with.
Welcome back to Craft Truck. In the cut with us today, Michael Jablow, picture editor.
A few years ago, I was on a panel with Richard Marx and Don Camburn and Lindsay Klingman at the Academy, and we were all asked if we would go back to work on film, and none of us said that we would go back to work on film.
You cut The Naked Gun.
Yes.
It's a fantastic movie. I still remember sitting uncomfortably in the theater, I think with my parents, when Priscilla Presley...
Nice beaver.
Yeah, exactly. And my dad laughing very loudly, and my mother getting angry at my father for laughing so loudly at that joke in my presence, you know? But
yes.
Meanwhile, I did get it.
It was actually an homage to Canada, that joke.
Yeah, it was, exactly. Because I think she then says, thanks, I just had it stuffed.
Yes.
And hands down a stuffed beaver. Was there a requirement on cutting a spoof that is different than cutting like a comedy that's just sort of more of a less breaking the fourth wall narrative?
Yes.
Okay.
It's totally different.
So what is the difference?
It is much more, believe it or not, mechanical. So that the script had a formula. They worked on the script for years before they made the movie. And the script, everything that is in the movie was in the script.
I must kill the queen.
Yes.
Right.
And the formula was 3 jokes a minute, 3 laughs a minute, both for the script and for the finished film. And if a joke did not work, it was out.
How many jokes did not?
Lots of them. The finished film was only 80 minutes long. It is one of the shortest theatrical features that I've ever done.
You don't even notice it.
Everything. No, you don't notice it. Everything in it is gold. Throw Mom from the Train is also a very short film. We didn't care if we violated continuity. We didn't care if we fucked up the plot. It was like if a joke didn't work, you pulled it and got around it. Because you had to keep those jokes coming, and
3 jokes a minute.
3 jokes a minute.
So if you watch the movie, it's 80 minutes long. You will find 240 jokes.
Yeah, and that'll literally just keep you laughing, and that was the way that we did that movie.
Right.
There was no attention to plot development. I mean, there is, for instance...
It has a plot that makes sense.
It has a plot that makes sense. Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But for instance, there was a whole joke. Drebin is wearing a blow-up umpire shield in the movie. And there's one point where it's all inflated. And there's another point with no explanation in a few shots later where it's all deflated.
Deflated, yeah.
And that's because we had a whole sequence there where he was shot in the shield and it deflated and sounded like farts. And we could never make the joke work, so bam, it was out of the movie.
Let's talk a little bit about Throw Mama, just to get specific. Okay, so the story is about this failing author.
Yes.
Billy Crystal.
Well, not a failing author. He's a guy with writer's block.
It's Billy Crystal's a guy with writer's block. Yes. His wife has stolen his last book.
Yes.
And made herself a celebrity. And he's teaching this writer's class. And he's got this nebbishy guy in his class, played by Danny DeVito.
Yes.
Who misunderstands him and thinks that the instruction he trains on a train means that he's going to kill his wife.
That's right.
And Billy Crystal's going to kill his mom. Saw the movie in the theater.
That film was thrilling because I got to re-edit Hitchcock.
Yeah, So crisscross. So
You do your murder, I'll do
do
mine.
mine.
No, I'll do your murder, you do mine. Oh Mama was a rather oddball movie. And it was an Orion picture. Orion was formed by the guys who decamped from United Artists
Right.
and started their own studio, Eric Pleskow and Arthur Krim and Benjamin. But they took a no blind bid print of the movie and previewed it without our knowledge in New Jersey. And on the last preview in Los Angeles, Eric Pleskow, who is very European and you know, walked up to Danny and asked him if he would cut the coin scene, which is the scene where Owen shows Billy Crystal his coin collection and says, "This is a nickel change my daddy gave me from this, and it was all change that his daddy had given him." And he asked to remove the scene from the movie.
okay.
And Danny, who is, I don't know, 4'8", walked up to him, stood right next to him, looked him in the face, and said, "I'll cut your balls off before I'll cut that scene out of my movie."
And so it stayed in.
The scene stayed in the movie.
Right.
We were talking about Todd Phillips before we started this.
Yep.
And on Old School, we reshot the last third of the movie.
The entire third act.
Yes, the entire third act. Todd had changed the original script when we were shooting the first time. And the fraternity, who the audience we later discovered grew to love, failed every single test to become a real fraternity. And the audience hated it. They loved the movie up until the point where Will Ferrell falls in the swimming pool, and then we just lost them.
Lost them.
We actually went into rewrites, restructured the whole end of the film, saving a few small scenes, and rewrote the whole last third of the movie and reshot it 4 months after we finished shooting the original film.
So how much of that was your involvement with suggestions of story? Were you actually sitting down with
Well,
Todd
yeah, I
Phillips?
was working with Todd Phillips
Yeah.
in terms of developing the story, but he and his writing partner were very much the writers.
Right. And on Old School, streaking to the gymnasium.
Yeah.
That sequence, I mean, you're talking about, one of the most memorable comedy sequences over the past several years.
That was all reshoot.
That was all reshoot.
That was all reshoot.
Streaking to the gymnasium.
Oh no, not the streaking to the gymnasium. No,
Okay.
that was the original. That was
Okay.
the original shoot.
Sorry, what did you think I was referring to?
I thought you were talking about the gym scene where Will was doing the ribbon dance.
Right.
That was reshoot because that's where
Ribbon
that's
dance.
the ribbon dance.
Yeah, that's
Which is
amazing.
one of my personal favorites. But yes, streaking to the gymnasium
Yeah.
was,
Now, what have you found as far as changing your style of editing? Have you had to make any adjustments or started to cut faster to keep up with the Joneses, or, I mean,
it's definitely faster. I mean, that people are very used to a really staccato pace of dialogue. And where when I started out editing, I might leave a certain amount of air at the beginning of ends and of lines. Now it's very rare that I do that unless I have a specific reason. I always wanted a sampler, a crocheted sampler for my editing room wall that says a minute is a long time. And which is something that all editors have got to remember all the time.
right.
Because especially in comedy, there is a kind of music
Yes.
to the dialogue.
Yes.
And where things will just like be sailing along at a very rapid pace, and then bam, you pause, punchline. You know, there are certain rules, and there are certain rules that, I mean, you know, there's the rule of three where you repeat a joke 3 times and it's funnier each time, or there's a variation on it.
Michael Jablow,
Thank you
thank
very
you for
much.
joining us. It was great having you.
Well, thank you.
No, it was wonderful.
It was great being had.